Welcome back to If I Knew You Better. I'm Brendan Davis, your host, and I'm recording today from lovely Palo Alto, California one more time, at least for one more introduction for this piece of the show. Then I head back to Beijing next week. If you're new to the show or new to kind of paying attention to my podcast stuff in general, I basically called LA home for many years. I'm from Atlanta originally, but I live in Beijing, China, and so I've been on this bit of a world tour for my day job in film and television, and I've been recording interviews along the way. It is Friday, April 12th, as I'm recording and releasing this show, and I travel on Tuesday this next week, so it is coming up really fast. So in keeping with the more international theme of this podcast versus my previous podcast, I have been able to record a lot of interviews, as I said, while I've kind of been traveling around. I have a couple of months worth of shows in the can, and I've got one or two more that I'm going to attempt to schedule before I go. So there's that. But today's guest is STEWART CARARAS. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about STEWART. He is a record engineer and producer and songwriter and musician. We met about 10 years. I've known him about 10 years, met about 10 years ago. And he was helping, his friend, his former studio partner, was producing a record for a friend of mine's band, and I got to know STEWART from being around all of that, but I still managed to mangle his last name. I call him CARARAS at the very beginning of the interview, and we laugh about it. How often do you say people's last names? Really? Not that much. Anyway, it was still kind of funny for me, but I want to start off this introduction by giving you a few quotes that I made note of as I went through the interview to edit and take out, breaths and ticks and hums and noises. A few things really, really struck me and have stayed with me since I did the edit. And one thing, and he has a lot of love for where he's from. He's from small town Louisiana, and I'm from, small town to big city South myself, so we relate on that a lot. But among the things STEWART said, I kind of compiled three different things, but I put it together as sort of one meta thought. Quoting him here, he says, "I could not have gotten out of Monroe, Louisiana, had I not done that, had I not been tenacious. I found a way to earn a living doing what I would otherwise do for free. Because what else are you going to do? Go do something that doesn't bring you joy, and then you just waste an entire life doing something you're mediocre at?" So, wow, can I relate to this? I say this in the show. I am actually an introvert who plays an extrovert in public. So STEWART's recognized need that he had to get out of his own comfort zone in order to do the things that he really felt compelled to do to live the life he was meant to live is something that I can really relate to. Now, STEWART is usually working on at least a few cool things, but as we talk about in the show, it's the nature of many people whose job doesn't really put them in the spotlight directly to be really cautious and reserved when it comes to basically name dropping about who they're working with. So, ironically, if most of what you know of the entertainment business is from mass market PR shills like People or Us Weekly, or celebrity gossip sites, or certain pop hip-hop music that's super name-droppy and calling people out, your impression of the entertainment business is very likely and understandably going to be that everyone is constantly talking trash about everyone else or themselves. Oh, they're talking about themselves all the time, shamelessly name-dropping. But STEWART is of the old school, the one that existed before this objectively awful moment in U.S. history did, which we will survive, I believe, and the old school rewards discretion and honors that, instead of its opposite, which is the paradigm of the moment. So anyway, I am digressing into a philosophical tangent, and that's not this show, at least not the introduction in theory. Our conversation was done in an actual recording studio. This is 2 for 2. Last week's show with Fred Taylor was in their podcasting studio at the Tomorrow Pictures offices in Atlanta. This week, we actually recorded in the control room of Central Command Studios in North Hollywood, and that is where STEWART is the in-house producer. He is a great friend and collaborator with the owner of the studio, the solo artist, former leader of the industrial rock band Godhead, Jason Charles Miller, who's a very cool guy. What's funny is that in addition to what you're actually going to hear on the show right now, STEWART and I had a great talk before and after the recording too. This show The interview portion with Stewart is almost an hour and a half long. I think it flies by pretty fast. We cover a lot of stuff. So if you're into it, it's not. I don't think it'll feel like a long show. Hopefully, in a bad way. Hopefully, only in a good way. But we must have talked for another hour and a half before and after, which was really, really cool. I'm really eager for you, though, to hear some of the cool music he's done that I have now heard. I am especially digging something. He mentions this in the interview, and I don't think that I'm inappropriately dropping a name, but he has this 70s musical glam project that we talk about in the interview. He's doing it in collaboration with singer-songwriter Frankie Clark. She is a total badass. She's actually the daughter of Gilby Clark, who was in Guns N' Roses and a bunch of legendary LA bands. But Stewart and Frankie have got this project, and he previewed it for me, and wow, I love the music. It is so badass, so cool, and it would go as the soundtrack along with a script or a book, as they call it in like musical theater, either as a stage piece or a web series or a TV piece or maybe a movie. Who knows? It's really early, and it's not my place to say what they're going to do with it. But I'm really excited to watch this whole possibly massive stage or screen project evolve. The music is so badass. I really love Frankie's voice and the writing and music in general, but I've got to give Stewart props on his vocals. We talk in the interview about how singing is this new thing, at least singing where you're in the front of the mix, right? I mean, we both sang backup in rock bands where you're shredding on guitar, but he sings a lot on this new project, and he's the lead singer on some of the songs, and he's really good at it. He absolutely owns it. He rocks his performances, and I've just got to give two big thumbs up for that. One last thing that he said that really resonated with me is maybe the most simple, and it's that he has this mandate to, whenever possible and advisable, to just say yes to things and then say, I'll figure it out, right? And this philosophy is something that has mostly served me well also. So it's really cool to be able to relate to him on this and in so many other ways too. I love Stewart to death. I wish I saw him a whole lot more. You can find out more information. The links will be linked here in the show notes. You can go to my website, crazyinagoodway.com/new, that's KNEW -resources. And that is where the resources for this show will live. It is very bare bones right now. If you're checking this out, basically as this show is a current release, you will just see a handful of links for Stewart as well as from Fred Taylor last week. I'm putting up a link to Central Command Studios. There is also a link to Stewart's bio on that site. He suggested that if anybody's interested to add him, the Instagram is the good place for him, so I'll put his Instagram link in there as well. But for now, please enjoy the show with Stewart CARARAS. I'm really happy to be here with Stewart CARARAS. Stewart, how are you, man?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm glad to be here. And we are in, where are we, actually, without giving away the street address?
It's a full-on vortex.
It is.
We are in North Hollywood.
Yes. And that would be north of Hollywood, in case you aren't from California.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to book a hotel here thinking it's going to be Hollywood, and you find it's the Holiday Inn Express in North Hollywood.
Right, not quite the vacation experience people are looking for.
Yeah.
But we are in a professional recording studio. Go figure.
That's what I'm told.
Yeah. And we are here. This is 2 in a row because the previous show was with Mr. Fred Taylor of Tomorrow Pictures in his studio in Atlanta. They have a podcast studio, and you'll hear that. We're recording this prior to the show's being out. But I'm really happy to get to talk to you in this format.
You as well. It's been a while, man.
It has been a while. We're going to unwind the hows and whys and the intersections and connections overall. But to get us started, how do you introduce yourself to people who you'd like to know better, right? When you actually want to give them a little taste of who you are in the seed of greater conversation.
Well, I start with a disclaimer, and I usually say I'm sorry.
Just a preemptive.
Yeah, totally.
Anything that happens, you're covered.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, it just, it's smooth sailing thereafter. But
I'm sorry, but I'm Stewart CARARAS. Okay.
That's it. Well, that's pretty much it. Yeah. But there's a long ellipses after, and it could just trail on forever.
And now the real answer.
Yes. Hi, I'm Stewart CARARAS, and it's lovely to meet you.
And I'll try to pronounce your name properly.
That's okay, because I was told several different ways of pronouncing it, and I just go with whatever the person in front of me thinks it is.
Well, CARARAS, it's a lot
of vowels.
Right.
I think
Sorry,
No, go
please
ahead.
continue. No, it's okay.
I think there's an equal number of vowels as there are. What do you call them?
Consonants.
Yeah.
There we go.
There
All
we go,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Now that we're all warmed up,
We're rolling here.
We're off to a good start.
So please continue. So you say your name and what do you say? Give us a little thumbnail about who you are and such.
Well, I say I make music and stuff, and I try to keep it, kind of normal. I'm just a normal guy that likes to make music.
There you
in
go.
whatever capacity I can do that.
Okay.
You know what? I identified what it was that brought me joy, and I try to do it as often as possible. It's very simple. That's it. You know what I mean?
Very nice.
And, I write, I produce, I play guitar, I play bass, and more recently, over the past year, I discovered I could sing, and that's a whole other can of worms we can get into.
Well, we
later,
have a
and how I
vocal booth
discovered it.
after we record. We might have to.
I mean, who knew at 46 years old that I would discover something new about myself that would be applicable to making music in some capacity? So,
well, who knew in our late 40s, early 50s we'd have long hair either? But
that's
well
true.
done, buddy.
We did it,
well
man.
done, buddy.
Yeah.
What do you consider to be your roots? And I know the answers to some of these questions, like geographically.
Yeah, geographically.
But I'm going to buy you time to drink that water.
Thank you.
So I know that you're from the South, as am I, but you're from a different room in the South, house.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
In Monroe, Louisiana.
And paint a picture of Monroe for people who haven't had the pleasure.
Wow, it's crazy because I feel so, as much as it doesn't, the feeling of that environment doesn't completely disappear from my DNA, but I've been away from it for two lifetimes.
Since you actually lived there.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
Right.
I moved away when I was 19.
Okay.
And I haven't been back a lot since. But yeah, it's kind of it certainly feels rural. It's a small town, but it's still a city. And it's about, I think, 60 miles east of Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay, right.
For those who don't know where that is, it's kind of positioned in between Shreveport, Louisiana, and Jackson, Mississippi. There's a college there. There's a civic center.
Right,
And
right.
I've seen Motley Crue and Bon Jovi.
Okay,
in those,
right. It's big enough that the Civic Center will hold the touring rock bands.
You could go see Motley Crue during the Dr. Feelgood tour. You could see Bon Jovi during New Jersey tour.
And did you?
Of course.
Excellent.
Hell yeah.
Well, you were still there is my point.
Yeah.
Carbon dating you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it was in stark contrast to my life in Los Angeles. Incidentally, a similar acronym, LA and LA.
Right.
Right. So, in growing up there, when I did, my only portal into the rest of the world was through MTV or television. I mean, I was 9 years old when MTV launched.
Okay.
In, what was that, August of 81?
Yeah.
So, I wasn't quite 10 years old. But, and everything else was just through, I was a daydreamer. I was the worst student. I was terribly bored in school. I would get straight A's and then all F's in conduct. Back when conduct was, you were graded on conduct.
Back when that mattered in general, I'm not so sure.
Remember, it was like there was that one grading scale which was like satisfactory or unsatisfactory.
Right.
You're like, I got another U or an S. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I would just get bored. I would stare out the window and I would draw and I would I would whatever. I was the worst in terms of being compliant or obedient as a child should be expected in the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean?
Was expected there, especially.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I was also an unwilling participant in a lot of corporal punishment.
Okay, on the receiving end.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Almost daily, and by multiple teachers.
Really?
All the way through probably 7th grade.
Yeah, they used corporal punishment for those of you lucky enough to have to stop and think, wait, I know those words because I'm educated, but I don't know that phrase. Yeah, they used to beat you as a kid.
Yeah.
And like actually used to whack the hell out of you
Yeah.
if you acted up. And that could be maybe you had it coming in a sense, or maybe you more than likely just, it was not your day to cross that particular teacher.
It was just kind of a default system of punishment.
It was weird. Strange, like people just smack the hell out of you.
Yeah, and your parents were okay with
Right,
it.
He must have deserved it. What did he do? Well, set him straight,
And I had this amazing teacher, and it's crazy because he's a friend of mine on Facebook all these years later. And in the 6th grade, his name was Seaburn Dunn.
That's a great name. That's a great Southern name.
Amazing guy. And he had a particular paddle that he used. Okay. And it was called Black Max. Okay. And it had holes drilled in it.
Because that makes it hurt worse.
Yeah.
And you can get more aerodynamic. Yeah, you can swing it faster.
Sure. He was
amazingly, that hurts more. With the whole pattern.
Yes. So I had this. Yeah.
Not that I have that much experience, or just a little.
I
don't want to try to front. I was a pretty good kid, but I feel your pain. To a degree. So why were you so bored, Stewart?
I don't know. Initially, I mean, when I was 6 years old, and someone gave me the Kiss Alive record.
Yeah, the first one?
The very first one.
Yeah.
And I picked it up and I looked at it, and I was maybe 6 years old. And I can remember, actually, they turned me on to another record, and I convinced my dad to take me to like a TG&Y, one of those kind of stores, like a Murphy's Mart. Do you remember those?
That's actually those two.
Like
I'm nodding, but I don't know the. Okay,
it was like in the
it's that kind of a store.
Yeah, it was a lower scale.
I don't think either one of those were where I was from, but
anyway,
Georgia's very different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those all-purpose stores where you could get like feed for your
the general
cat.
store.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. But you could also get a Kiss album.
I need some Shotgun Shells and a Kiss record. And,
I remember literally the day that we went to, everything about going to the store to get that album. And I got 2 albums. I got the Kiss Alive record, and I got the Hotter Than Hell record.
Oh, okay. Excellent choice.
Yeah, so I got both of those records. I brought it home, put it on the turntable, and I looked at that cover as I was listening to it. And it was kind of like a roller coaster experience where you're equal parts terrified and equal parts totally excited. And I'm looking at it and I go, that's what I want to do. And that is the path. That's what there it is. And I'm still doing it to some degree. Obviously, I don't have the exact same trajectory as a 6-year-old.
You don't have the platform boots and the makeup.
Right.
Or maybe you do, that's your business. But
internally,
you're not wearing them now.
Yeah, Gene Simmons is, there's a little Gene Simmons living inside
Hopefully
me.
You're channeling the non-misogynistic.
Right. Yeah, there's a little more Ace Frehley. Yeah, I think it's probably that.
All right. Ace was my guy.
Me too. But, so that was it. And here we are.
Well, I was, not to make you jealous, but I was a founding member of the KISS Army.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. I'm 4.5 years older than you, yeah. And I got, there was a deluxe KISS thing that had the first 3 records repackaged in a fold-out. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that one as well? So... I forget. I mean, Hotter Than Hell was one of the first 3 records, but they
Dressed
had
to Kill, Kiss, and then, or rather, Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, Dressed to Kill.
Exactly, and all 3 of those were in a package that they did because it took them a while to catch on. I mean, I guess Kiss probably has a Kissopedia or something with all the details. But so that's pretty interesting that Kiss was your gateway drug into rock and roll depravity and living in Los Angeles, greater Los Angeles area.
Sure.
So so that's what set you on the path. I mean, did you start acting up? Now, actually, I have to confess, because I've seen you post occasionally your photos of you with the rock and roll, the childhood version of rock and roll, everything with the hair and the
parachute pants. You seen that?
Pants.
Oh, yeah,
that's a good look, buddy.
Yeah, man,
that's a good look.
Yeah.
I think that's due for a comeback, only not on me. But you were starting to play in bands. Were you playing guitar first, or what were you doing?
I was probably I didn't really it was like I felt like I was completely in my own world. And I was of my own resolve to try and, I had created this path, and I knew no one else that had a similar aspirations to myself. And so I just did things by rote. Everything I did was probably wrong, and it probably took me a lot longer to accomplish it than had I had someone say, no, you do it this way. But the good thing about learning something by rote is you immediately apply it. Right?
Right, like you learn how to play, say, scales on an instrument.
Right. You
and so
own
it's,
it.
this is boring, and then you realize, my fingers know how to do all this.
Sure, exactly.
It's wired in now.
Totally. So if I learned something, I was immediately applying it. And it also had more to do with my desire to learn it and my desire to want to apply it,
Right.
Yeah. And so if there was something I didn't like, I was like, out the window, but I'll focus on this other thing. So what was really strange about it, and I recognize this more now because there's a lot of people that are friends of mine who were in some of the bands that were my kind of inspiration,
sure.
Specifically in the 80s, and I didn't have a lot of people in my world that were influencing me or telling me how to do something or not to do something or how to do it better or I'm doing it wrong. So I just kind of did it. And I didn't know that you could just go get good enough to play like, a punk rock ethos. Where you just pick up the guitar and you go, crank, crank, crank. That's good enough. Let's do it. Yeah. I didn't know that was something that you could do. My criteria was I would listen to my favorite artist.
Right.
And I would have to be as good as them.
Sure. I relate to this.
So in the 80s, for instance.
Yeah, who were you into? Who were the early, who were the folks?
Well, by the 80s, I was into Satriani, Steve Vai, all of those guys, and it was a fertile ground for a guitar player.
Absolutely.
Which explains,
pushed everybody to try to be a wizard and
right. So here I was in
try to actually get good.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So here I was in Monroe, Louisiana, and everybody else I knew, kind of on the periphery, was in a band doing their thing, and they were just in town playing covers, and it wasn't like they had huge aspirations to do anything, beyond, that, or so it seemed. They didn't reveal that. Yeah. And here I was going, well, until I get as good as Steve Vai, I can't go out and get in a band. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
So by the time I got into a band, which I think I was probably 18 years old, which was insane when you think about it. So I'd been playing since I don't know, 12 years at that point or something like that.
Yeah, I started about that.
And then
around 10 probably.
Yeah, I started when I was 6 or 7.
I used to say 8, and I think it was actually around 10 for me. But green stamp acoustic guitar.
Oh, God, that's so hilarious.
Yeah.
Mine was a Sears Silvertone acoustic guitar.
Oh, cool. And that's worth a pretty penny for the hipsters.
I think it is now, right?
Yeah.
But, I somehow avoided getting in a band because my standard, I had this bar that was just so high, and I didn't know anything else. I assumed everybody else had the same criteria. Like they were like, yeah, well, we're in these bands because we're as good as the people we admire. Right. Like we're all peers, and I'm like, I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. I think that's my.
You're trying to learn how to shred, and you're working on your sweet picking and trying to play a little Yngwie.
They used to call me Legato. I had a friend. He was
music nerds are laughing right now.
Because I had this whole Steve Vai legato thing going. Yeah. Ridiculous. So yeah, I chased that as far as I could. And eventually you get so bored with yourself. You're like, I think I've played every note in every combination of those notes. Mm-hmm. I just want to do something else now.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into production. Literally, because I was so bored with myself. I was so I didn't feel I could be any more narcissistic.
You got super nerdy good, and then but you're not really. You're not out there playing with people and doing a thing and not getting satisfaction from it.
Well, I did go. Well, I got satisfaction from it, and I was in bands by that point because I had moved away, and I was now in Florida doing those things. And I was older, I was an adult-ish.
Okay.
At least in terms of my ability to join the military or buy alcohol.
According to society's rules.
I could vote, but I just got bored with myself, and I wanted to seek alternatives, because by that point, I'd gotten fully in by I think maybe 18, 19 years old, I'd gotten fully immersed in recording music. Because as soon as I could figure it out, or rather I could hear what I was playing back to me, and it wasn't like this nebulous sort of abstract thing that I just heard in my head. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh wow, how do I do more of that? Long story short, I did that so much that I just got annoyed with myself, because I was pursuing this path that I was going to be an instrumental guitar player.
Okay.
And, like my peers, Steve Vai and Eric Johnson and
and Al Di Meola, maybe?
Maybe a little bit.
He was a little more jazzy for you.
Yeah, he was a little more jazzy. Yeah. And probably a little more shreddy. I know that sounds ridiculous to say, given the other people I've described, or noted. But
you were more shreddy than
I thought Al Di Meola was a little more shreddy.
Oh, totally.
In a fusion sort of a way.
Absolutely.
And fusion just kind of annoyed me in a weird way.
I think it annoys a lot of people. I enjoyed it back in the day, but I can't really listen to it now.
But here's the thing.
I love like Coltrane. I love Kamasi, but I mean, who doesn't love those guys? But that's more the jazz that nods to the past.
Right. There's so much that I love, but there's so much that I love as a admirer and a listener rather than a player.
Oh, totally. There's lots of stuff I love it,
so much,
but it doesn't move me to want to try to pick up a guitar,
right.
Or play anything.
Sure.
But I love to listen to it, and for me, that's because I know about songwriting and production, and a lot of what you're loving, like just the little part, it's actually, you realize, well, the guitar's not just like rocking from start to finish.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, change the sound, little flourish here, little thing. It's the sum of the parts that makes it cool.
Absolutely.
And so I don't want to play to it. I want to soak in it.
And you set it up. Something can be cool because of the setup too. In and out of that thing, and that's all arrangement. You know what I mean?
Right. So when did you become such a production nerd? And I mean that with love, of course.
No, that's great.
Like what were you? You said you were recording, high school, college, young age. What were you recording? Were there 4 tracks? Did you have one of those little Fostex?
Well, first
cassette 4 tracks back in the day.
I did.
Those were good. Those were a game changer.
I actually started with 2 boom boxes. I did that way back. My younger brother and I, we started with, we would do impromptu radio shows.
Okay.
I was 11 and he was 8. And I think what we did was we would just press record on the boom box, right? Mm-hmm. And we would just start talking. We would be talking about all these ridiculous things like, the debut album from Jackson Browne, blah, 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 blah. And we were like kids, and we had these horrific, or I don't want to say horrific.
What is it, like super Southern accents?
It's super, it's like,
there's some takes to me where I'm like, hey, y'all, how you doing? It's like, that's not me. And that was me.
Yeah, and I listened back to that, and I'm like, wow. But I remember not knowing what, I remember seeing like on the dial, you'd see the frequency, not, and when I translated that to our radio station call number was KHKZ, which was kind of some bastardized version of kilohertz, right?
Okay.
So we had our radio station was KHKZ, or it was more like KHKZ. so we would do that, and I still have this particular cassette with all this on it.
All right.
And it's actually one of my next tattoos, but yeah. So we started that, and then as I've heard many people talk about this, they would put that kind of evolved into me doing playing one cassette like Foreigner's Hot Blooded, right?
Right.
Because there's something about that suspension that I love, da 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 da, and that's so common amongst so many songs that I love. I don't know, but anyway, so I would play that, and with the other boombox, I would start shredding along with it, just full on, and I still have all these tapes.
All right.
And so I did that for a long time, and then I think when I was in my senior year of high school, which was just a blur, because quite honestly, I had failed so many grades. I was technically a senior, but I don't know really what grade I was in.
Not quite sure how.
Yeah, I don't know, because I didn't have enough credits to qualify as a sophomore, I think.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was bizarre. So I was just going to school because that's what you were supposed to do. And
that's where the lunch is.
That's where lunch is. Exactly. Yeah. But and at that time, I think I enjoyed lunch a little too much, too often, to be honest with you. Yeah. For a brief time. I worked at McDonald's that's another story.
So you haven't always been this felt figure I see before
I have not, no. Okay. There was about a year and a half where I had to become acclimated to,
to starvation?
A legitimate diet. And
Copy
work
that.
out.
You had to work that out. Yeah. I've heard that's a good thing. I got to get on that too. Let's fast forward perhaps a little bit. I'm not sure how far that goes, but what was your first real success as you defined it at the time? When did you feel like, oh, I've done something with music, whether it's playing or production or some kind of a gig or something that you were able to, what's sort of a milestone that you could objectively look at and think, that was an important win to be able to continue onward.
Professionally, my first professional success was in 2005. I was living in New Orleans at the time. I had a great studio, and it was really a fantastic building. And we had only been there about a year and a half, my partner and I. And I was working on a record, and at the same time I was running the studio professionally. My whole desire was to just have the studio, but it wasn't quite as practical as it is perhaps in Los Angeles or Nashville or somewhere where there's an industry.
Right.
Whereas in New Orleans, I'm still kind of an outlier.
You didn't know you could keep it booked all the time.
Right.
Keep his bills paid.
Right, exactly. So I was moonlighting as a server in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And I was working at a great restaurant. And I worked on a record for Atlantic Records that summer of 2005. We're talking about a month before Hurricane Katrina. And I was living there during Katrina.
Oh, shoot. Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
And that's another story.
Right, we'll get to that.
Yeah, so I believe it was July 2005. I was working on this record with Atlantic Records. And that record went to number one. But what's really cool is I could say that I kind of got a number one record while I was moonlighting in a restaurant.
Oh,
and
right.
To me, that means more than so many things, because it was and it was weird because on one hand you want to be perceived as a professional, and you don't want to tell anybody, yeah, I just worked all night at the restaurant. Now I'm going to show up here and I run the studio and I'm an engineer and I'm a producer and I'm this guy and that guy. So you just kind of keep it to yourself, and you don't really tell anybody what you're doing or your circumstance, or that you're living in a basement somewhere. You know what I mean? Right,
absolutely.
But that was definitely my first professional experience that I felt, at least, I don't know, it was really just career defining, and for all the right reasons. You know what I mean?
And can you say what the record is, or was it a?
It was a record by an artist called Juvenile.
I remember Juvenile.
Yeah, and it was a record called Reality Check.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did that lead to? I mean, was that like a magic entree onto bigger, better, or you said this was out a month before Katrina? So what does your story go from there? The record's going to number one, and you're feeling like, all right, I did it with my night job, day job, and I'm on the way. And how long did you get to bask in that glow, and where did that lead?
Well, I will tell you this. I do recall that was July 2005 that I did that record. And I didn't have a lot of involvement, but I had enough involvement to where I felt like I could at least say I kind of participated. Even if it was
you were
just
part
a
of it.
very trivial part of it. Yeah. And I remember that summer saying, just for no reason, I had no plan, or rather, I had no plan of attack other than just a bold proclamation that by the end of the summer, I'm no longer going to be working in a restaurant. And on August 29th of 2005, that's when Hurricane Katrina hit. Oh, wow. And guess what? I was no longer working in a restaurant.
Because nobody else was either.
Right. So my wife at the time, she and I owned a house in New Orleans. We had only been married, I think, 14 months, and only owned the house for a very short time. And that house fared well. However, my studio did not.
Oh.
My studio was in the city limits where it incurred, I think, 3.5 feet of water.
Wow.
That remained in Remember, the water was not drained.
Yeah, exactly. That
so
was
it
part of
just
the
eventually
issue.
the water stayed in the studio for like 3.5 weeks.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
so it's a teardown at
It was
that point.
it was awful. And that studio was what was going to be the Grammy Museum, because I don't know if you recall this, but in 2005, New Orleans was going to be the place. They had the bid.
Yeah, that's right. I do. We were talking earlier. My old drummer's long been involved actually in the Grammys.
Yeah.
He's a national board member.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
I always hear like Grammy information just following her Facebook.
Nice. But that was going to be, that building was designed to be the Grammy Museum.
Wow.
And what happened is they pulled funding for it, and the building was just kind of left, to be purchased, leased, or whatever.
Right.
And we had a friend of ours, a local mastering engineer named Parker Dinkins, who does a lot of forensic work. He worked on the OJ stuff.
Really?
Yeah,
All right.
He told me some stuff about the forensics tapes. But
okay, yeah. Well, we'll probably have to say that for off the mic. So I'm not subpoenaed.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I don't think they're going to reopen that anytime soon.
Nah.
Sadly for justice. Anyway,
It's pretty cold now. But so he bought the building, turned it into a multi-room recording studio and a mastering studio for himself. And anyway, so that place got a lot of water. My house did not. But what was crazy is there was such a demand for homes in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina that because my house had not incurred any floodwaters, just a little structural damage, which we corrected and had someone come out and
sign off.
Do some repairs and little things like that. I sold my house. Actually, what happened is I went to a Home Depot, grabbed a for sale by owner sign, stuck it in the front yard, and sold it for 12% over market value 3 weeks after Hurricane Katrina.
Wow. So you had obviously a good place to be.
And our house, the sale of our house was like predicated upon the sale of 2 other houses, because one person had to sell their house, a blighted home, so that they could take that and then buy our house.
Okay.
And, it was just weird. It was just a whole weird thing, and it was all such a blur because it happened so quickly.
But it moved fast because
I was living in New Orleans. I was a homeowner in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. Wasn't really allowed back till almost the 1st of October in the city, and I was living in Los Angeles on December 1st.
Okay.
So within 2 months, I was sold the house and living in Los Angeles. That quickly within a 2-month period.
Wow.
That quickly. So,
Well, so let's unwind this a bit. So as far as LA, had you been out here for work or adventures?
A little bit here and there,
so
yeah.
You'd been like building a professional network of folks out here a bit?
Yeah.
And been thinking about the move for a while? Or was it really out of necessity in this case? Because it sounds like you had a pretty sweet spot down there.
Well, I remember at the time, my wife and I, everybody evacuated that could evacuate.
Sure.
From in New Orleans from Hurricane Katrina, and I went obviously north to Monroe, Louisiana, where my mother was living.
Okay.
And just like the rest of the world, we were all watching it on television, and we watched it unfold. And I think the very day that we saw the floodwaters happening, because if you recall, it was being reported that everything's fine, and then there was like a levee breach. Remember that? There was a break in the London Street levee or whatever it was. I can't remember.
And like flooded a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and then the floodwaters.
Yeah.
So
and people have been starting to maybe clean up and then like smack in the face again.
Right. And we just looked at each other. So
horrible.
It was a terrible, terrible time, and it was really a time of I was evacuated for almost a month, not knowing anything. Like, you don't know what's going on.
Jeez, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of hearsay, because the only people that are in New Orleans at this time are National Guardsmen. Nobody. I mean, there's like, you can't call a neighbor and say, hey, can you check on our house to see if the power is out?
Because they're also
everybody's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you saw the what was going on in like the Superdome, and people, it was that or one or the other, and one of the two extremes. And I remember just watching the entire city flooding in real time on television, And I looked at my wife and I'm like, we can't go back to that, because her job was she was in the print publishing business as a journalist. And I was a recording studio guy. I'm like, what are we going to go back to? So we had a short list of all of these different cities: Nashville, Seattle, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. We love San Francisco.
Yeah, great spot. Great
Nashville, place. And it was kind of like, I think the agreement was that because we stayed in New Orleans, because she was from New Orleans, we stayed so that she could, flourish in her job. And I guess from her perspective, I didn't think it was even a thing, that she wanted to reciprocate by saying, let's do it for you now.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's amazing. Of course, I love that. Of course, let's do it. So we looked at the short list and we were like, let's go. Los Angeles it is. So I started calling everybody up I knew in Los Angeles.
Hey, I'm coming.
Yeah. So, and everything just
I remember those phone calls.
Yeah, man. So, and everything fell into place just as it was almost as though you had a plan, and it all just, every step that you took worked out, and then you reflect on the tragedy as to how, in terms of how you got to making those decisions,
yes,
and you're
exactly.
like, well, fuck, man, maybe this is going to work. Maybe this is how it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
sorry, it took a hurricane to make it happen.
We weathered the storm, literally, and here we are. Yeah. I came out here a couple of weeks prior to moving here, and hooked up with a friend of mine, Brian, at the studio in the Cahuenga Hollywood studio.
Yeah, Brian Yasulka.
Yeah.
Met you.
Yeah, exactly. And I got up with him, and
a award-winning producer,
Grammy award-winning
mixer, producer.
He did that Lisa Loeb record.
Lisa Loeb.
That Rescued record. That Rescued record was so brilliant.
Just heartbreakingly great.
So I came out here. I had a 2-week window, or maybe it was 10 days. I was like, I'm going to go fly out to Los Angeles for 10 days. I'm going to go find a place to live. We're going to, get all my ducks in a row and, sort out all the logistical stuff.
Sure.
Which now when I look back, I'm like, what was I thinking? It's LA. It's not like I'm moving, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like a lateral move from New Orleans to wherever, you know what I mean? It's like, you got to have it together to come out here. And I gave myself 10 days.
Okay. Yeah. It takes a while if you don't really have an ingrained sense of the neighborhoods and the geography of this place. And finding the right spot for what you plan to do is, it's you could make a really wrong decision.
Totally.
You give me a place, it might be a lovely place to be, but it's the wrong place considering traffic and whatnot for where you need to, because traffic is such a issue here.
Yeah, I made, again, a million different mistakes with regards to location. However, for every wrong mistake, I think I made up for it tenfold in the good mistakes.
Okay.
So like hooking up with Brian at that studio.
Yeah, that was a great spot.
Oh my God, we were there for almost a decade together.
Wow.
And there was never any weirdness. We had, it just worked. And it was funny because I talked to him about a month ago about this. And I was like, how does that work? How did it just work for us? Because I came in town for 10 days, showed up, we had like a little, remember Gear Sluts? Remember that? So we were huge into Gear Sluts and that whole world.
Explain what that is for the sake of people.
Well, it was an online community. It was one of the original online communities for
message boards. Yeah. I need this. How do you do that?
Well,
and do you have one of these for sale? And I get this.
Yeah, and it was
or
all
I can
things
rent it to you. And
audio related, engineers, mixers, producers, in every facet of the music industry, whether it's in post production, live sound, and it spanned, every level, whether you're the top of the totem or you're at the bottom of the rung, just a novice, getting into the business. And
you guys were really active in there.
Yeah, we were really active in that, and it was such a great time because it was all very new. Because it was, that was around 2002, and it was at the time it was by invitation only. Jules Standen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he would send out invitations on other message boards like the Pro Tools message board.
He'd see you posting in another legit forum.
And he was
like,
you
hey,
seem like
part of this. All
right. So it was a very, very small community.
So and say vouched for you, or
I guess so. Yeah. Who knew? They were like, hey, that was that guy from New Orleans. Let's just give him a free pass.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Guy had a rough ride.
Yeah, he literally boated here, but
Oh man.
yeah, on a raft or something.
So you stumbled into this awesome long-term relationship where you shared the studio with Brian Isolka.
Yeah.
And that worked great, and that's where I met you.
Right. You were working with Chuck Lee.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, we were doing a video for that band that he was in for a minute.
Right.
And with me and my old producing partner, he directed it and I produced it.
Yeah.
Now I know, and for the sake of people listening, and if you've heard my previous show, you've occasionally heard people who, for lack of a less crass way to say it, work with famous people. And so there's sort of a protocol of what you do and don't say. So obviously it's you don't want to come off as name droppy. It's seen as very bad. Although of course people are usually interested. Well, what records did you do? Yeah. Tell us what records. People want to know this stuff. So I'm going to ask the question and you answer with your comfort level, because there may be a few things you're proud to talk about by name and whatnot, or just you might just say this genre of music. But what are some of your, if I could be so bold as to sort of put you on the spot, what are some of the things that you've been part of that you are most proud of, or that people might be familiar with, or just things that are satisfying, whether it's genre or specific act, if it's a record or an act that you can kind of name check?
I kind of define my successes by the experience I have. Like, the experience of making those records is the reward. So I don't need, there's no like final destination, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and I think about those magical moments of making those records. And like, I did some stuff with Taryn Manning that was just so inspired.
Yeah.
And we would just, it was almost like I was like a kid in my bedroom, just like up all night, but yet we'd be at the studios, the one on Hollywood Quaker.
Sure.
And we'd just be there at 2 a.m, and she'd be like, I'd be working on one song, we'd just be hanging out, making music. And I remember one time she's like, hey, what if we do a cover of this song by the Eagles? I love this song called I Can't Tell You Why. And I'm like, I don't know that song. Like I know the song, but I don't know it enough to go stop what we're doing and go play it. Like I'd have to learn it and everything. Right. She goes in there, check this out. She goes in there, in the studio, no pitch reference, no click track, and then she sings the song a cappella. And then I later take her vocal and then
you do the instrumentation.
Yeah, do the instrumentation later, and then she goes back. Once we get the song built up enough, we go back and then start doing some pickups and overdubs and things like that.
Did she have perfect pitch? Did she?
Man, she's just.
Did she slot it right in there?
It was so
cool. You didn't have to detune like an eighth of a note to make it work
and
or
she
something.
Just went in there with nothing. It was like
crazy. It's in her soul to do that.
Yes, the song was in her head, and
cool.
She was basically singing along to what she heard in her brain.
Sure. And on pitch, which is insane.
Yes.
It's an insane accomplishment to
totally
do that. Yeah.
So I just went in and I just built the track up, but that's like an amazing experience that you can't really. Those are things that you can't really plan. They just happen, and then you got to be prepared and just go with it.
Yeah, right.
And that's the magic that I'm always chasing, and it's so addicting.
Yeah.
Because it's not as natural as it is to occur. It doesn't naturally happen all the time because we build this construct for ourselves, this sort of avatar of who we are, what we are, and how that we create that parallel in our real persona and our professional persona. And we feel like we kind of have to stay true to that, and that's kind of our lane. But it's those moments that I feel most authentic. And to be authentic is the absolute truth. Because you're adhering to nothing more than the absolute truth. It's like if my whole intention, I don't really have a lot of goals anymore other than to be as close to the truth as possible. And I feel if that's my starting point, if that's my Zen sort of zero, I start at zero and now let's figure it out, then I'm okay. Because I can stop and take a breath and then start there. Now let's add 1. Let's add 2. Let's add, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Add only what is required, what is needed for that moment, that task at hand to manifest whatever vision that is. And it was really interesting because Taryn, like, despite whatever things she and I worked on together or whatever she had done in the past, I remember her telling me something that was very epiphanal for me.
Okay.
And it resonated so deeply with me that because at the time, you know, when you're a professional, you put yourself in a position to be constantly seeking professional things, and professional endeavors that kind of support that narrative and that construct.
Right.
You know, and you're always, I mean, being ambitious means that you're never going to be present. You can't be both, right?
Right.
You're always going to be thinking ahead to the next thing. How can I get to this level? You know what I mean? Because the present is just time to explore those opportunities, those potential. Everything is a potential.
Yes.
You know, and what she said brought it all, you know, crashing down on me as to how full of shit I was.
Okay.
You know, and I was living this ridiculous sort of life that was just flying past me, and I was never in the moment. And she said, I don't think about the success of the song or how good the song is. I think about I value the experience. Mm-hmm. How much, like, if I had a great time making that song is the result of that.
Right.
It's like you're giving birth to something that was a joyous occasion, or if it was, what if it was an amazing song that brought you this hit record and all this fame and fortune and adulation and so forth, but you had a shitty time making it, and it was just the worst. Yeah. And it was fraught.
Yeah, you wouldn't be in a hurry to do it again, which is why some of the bands we like that notoriously had a struggle to get there.
Sure.
Why they have bitterness or they break up or whatever. It's like, yeah, the output's great, but they nearly killed each other to do it.
But then you think that really has something that, for me anyway, I looked at it, I don't want to say I had an existential crisis, but I had an existential sort of evaluation where I just looked at that and I'm like, man, all these cliches that you hear throughout your life, like stop and smell the roses, be in the moment, and this and that, they ring so true. Because being a type A personality, which I've discovered later was not really my thing. I think I'm sort of kind of a Hank Moody, Californication, lovable loser kind of a person.
Okay.
I think inside...
But you had to play the type A to do the gig?
I could not have gotten out of Monroe, Louisiana had I not done that. Had I not
I'm
been
an
so
introvert
tenacious.
who plays an extrovert in public.
Yes, exactly.
I have to.
But
I'm really happy as like a hermit alone. And I have plenty of friends or whatever.
Totally.
But I don't want to be out at like late. I want to be home and doing something interesting to me or thoughtful to me, or
exactly.
Or if I'm screwing off, it's to I need it. If I'm not doing anything productive, by God, I must need to do that.
And you know what? It's not. It's never really something lavish. It's never. It's like sitting at home,
totally
Netflix, and
non-glamorous in my case.
It could be something so simple and so cheap, free or otherwise.
Sure.
But it's those things that I hold so dear to myself, because I realize that however tough people are on the exterior, it's inversely proportional to how they really are inside.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think we're all of us artists, to varying degrees, are all just broken, fragile little dolls waiting to be, you know what I mean? We're in need of constant validation, whether we like it or not, whether we want to admit to it or not.
Yeah.
We might, because on the other end of all of this, which is, when I think about it, it's so ironic that I was in pop music, entrenched in it for so long.
You're making some shiny records.
There were a few of those, and again, that had to do with being a professional.
Sure.
You feel like if you're going to be in a commercial studio doing commercial work, that you need to work on commercial music.
Yeah, makes sense.
That was just my thinking, because You know,
You don't do like a podcast. Oh wait,
Oh, yeah,
never
right.
mind. Sorry,
Well,
we're in one and we're doing a podcast.
Well, the cost of living was so much, and plus,
Exactly.
you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
I had a wife that relied on me to, contribute, my fair share.
Right.
And so I couldn't just work on music that wasn't going to bring money.
Sure.
But as you can see, I have a Frank Zappa tattoo.
Yeah, that's a great one. He has Frank's very iconic mustache on his left elbow. That's really awesome. I don't know that I actually seen that in your photos before.
Yeah. But I also have
the Bowie. I remember when you got the Bowie.
Yeah.
He got the Bowie lightning bolt.
Yeah. But
as well.
There was a time that you got to think of this kid from Monroe, Louisiana, that has nobody's telling me how to do things. Nobody's saying, here, if you pick up the guitar and play it like this, you can go do this, be in this band.
Yeah.
You know what? You don't have to be that great. You don't have to be Mr. Legato player. You don't have to be Steve Vai. Play a couple of strums and go play in a band. Figure it out with the guys. You're the sum of the parts. You're all
right.
You're all equally as good as you are, and how you whatever it is you guys manifest together that's your thing. I didn't have any of those things.
Yeah.
So then I read about Steve Vai in a magazine because I'm in Monroe, Louisiana. There's no Steve Vai in my universe.
Sure.
I'm just thinking it's so far-fetched, far. It's larger than life to me, like everything. And so he talks about this guy, Frank Zappa, and I'm like, oh, what's that about? Then I go and get into him, and I realize, I'm the kid that's like super into like George Carlin, Richard Pryor.
Sure, me too, yeah.
So then you see a Frank Zappa guy, and he's like the music version of those guys.
He's telling the truth through his music.
Right.
These guys are telling the truth through comedy and commentary.
Sure. So that resonated with me. So here I am. I'm super into this Frank Zappa character. And I start to see, like, the way he basically was an unmitigated participant in music. And he did whatever he wanted without compromising anything. He just was somehow made it work. Like, he was an indie artist in a commercial world. In and out of it. But
right.
He wasn't like... someone so obscure that you didn't know his name or that he wasn't worthy of a branding.
He had a handful of songs that crossed into the
even Valley Girl.
Top 40 and Valley Girl, and
I knew everything. Like I read the Frank Zappa, the real Frank Zappa book, everything, book. And he was sort of my this high watermark for what I thought could be possible. So again, back to that kid who thought he couldn't go out and play music until he was as good as the guitar players he was listening to. And we're not even talking about songwriting. That's a whole other level.
Right.
I was oblivious. I was a moron in that regard too. We'll get to that. But the Frank Zappa thing was, I saw where a lot of different he was famous for getting all these great players, and when they were really young, putting them in his band, like the Steve Vai, Warren Cucurullo, who was a missing persons later in Duran Duran, all these guys, and I thought they were all amazing, and I was like, oh, that's what I'm gonna do. That's gonna be my jump start, as an 18-year-old kid or whatever. I'm going to go get good enough, as good as Steve Vai, and I'm going to go and audition for Frank Zappa's band, and I'm going to get on a tour with him, and I'm going to play all his music.
Nice.
That's exactly what I set out to do.
All right.
So I learned a vast portion of his repertoire.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
And there was a particular song, and all the Frank Zappa nerds are going to know this song.
The Black Page?
The Black Page, and it was called The Black Page because it had so many notes on the page there was so much
solid ink.
Yeah, it was just ink on the page. It was more black than there was white on the page.
Right.
But did you know this? That was just being able to play all those insane tuplets.
Yeah.
There's like 11 tuplets and 13. And
yeah.
that wasn't it. You had to also be able to dance while playing it on stage.
Dance moves while you played that? Wow.
And I remember Adrian Belew in, was it Baby Snakes? The video. They did a video of Baby Snakes. And Adrian Belew, I believe, was in the band at the time. and he was playing it wearing a dress, I think, playing it and dancing. And I was like, that's the standard. I got to work it. I got to do that.
Yeah.
And by 1993, I think it was 1992, I could do that.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure to what degree I could do one or the other better, whether I was playing better than I was dancing. That's the jury's still out on that.
All right.
Fortunately, there's no
video.
There's no video of that. And that was in 93 when he passed away in December. Right. And I remember there was a lot of conjecture about his the prognosis or his status because I think he had prostate cancer. There was a lot of press conferences, and like Dweezil or somebody would go on and they would do some kind of blurb and say, they disavowed his diagnosis or prognosis or whatever it was at the time. And then one day he just died, right?
Right.
But during that whole time, I was like, oh, I'm ready. I can play these songs. I can dance while playing the Black Page. And then he dies, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not doing that. There's literally no,
your fallback plan was non-existent.
Yeah, so it wasn't even, a possibility. It was like, no, the guy's not here. So that's that whole goal that you set for yourself. Yeah, I couldn't do that anymore. I was playing all those songs, Montana, Inca Roads, which is one of my favorite songs.
Great song.
On Overnight Sensation.
Gotta be bizarre to try to play that.
Was it Overnight Sensation? No, it was the one with the maroon sofa. Was it?
Was that
One Size Fits All?
Was that a Mother's record?
No, that was the Zappa Solar. One Size Fits All. My bad. Inca Roads.
Nice. Well, how did you? I mean, I have this potted question, which these are just for a jumping off point anyway. But I want to sort of ask you this. What is your wiring for dealing with challenges and adversity and stuff? I mean, you mentioned having to sort of get your type A, sort of adopt a type A type of a headspace or an approach. What would you say? What has basically powered you through? Because it is a long way, as I don't need to tell you, but for the sake of me saying something that you understand, for the audience, it's a long ass way from Monroe, Louisiana to making it as you are in Hollywood. So you've dealt with a lot of craziness. I mean, you told us the Hurricane Katrina story, but just general day to day. Now I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that the challenges are more like professional plateaus and creative blocks and things like that. But what do you sort of, what's your approach to kind of winning your life without me sounding too motivational about that?
I think that I found a way to earn a living doing what I would otherwise do for free. Because I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's gonna. I'm just gonna do it whether I get paid or not.
That's gonna be a theme on this show, I think, with the people I have lined up, and Fred, who was on last week.
Yeah.
This is a theme that I'm probably gonna hear a lot.
And when you define what it is that you want to do, again, it's that Joseph Campbell thing. Find what you love, or rather, that was Charles Bukowski's version of it. To find what you love and let it kill you, which I have on a T-shirt.
Oh yeah, okay.
But Joseph Campbell, the hero, what was it? The hero's journey. Yeah, he was like finding your bliss. That whole thing. Mm-hmm. And it's such a very Zen concept because it's so simple. It's just like find what you love and just do it as often as you can. Whatever brings you joy, do that. Because what else in the fuck are you gonna do? I mean, go do something that doesn't bring you joy, and then you just waste a life doing some shitty thing in your life that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you're going to probably be mediocre at and like waste life by doing something that you hate doing.
Sure.
And all of my life, most everybody that knows me, and it's weird because, as you know, there are points in your life where people know you for being this person.
Right.
And then they know you as being this person and this person.
Oh, yeah. I'm on like my 12th to 13th like version of me and what I do and what I'm about. And
Yeah, and it's a weird thing because you always want to go back and go, hey, I'm sorry for being that dick that I was back in 94.
There's that too. Yeah, no, I could do a one-man apology tour for a couple of years
let's do
for
that.
my different...
I will open for you and park your car. Yeah, I will valet your car.
I appreciate that I'm the headliner.
Yeah, buddy.
Somehow.
Hey.
Wow. It's like you know me better than we thought.
Hey.
Speaking of knowing people, what do you wish you were better at? I mean, you're accomplished, highly accomplished musician, producer, engineer, songwriter. What let me ask you this. What does a typical day look like for you in terms of professional stuff? Like how much do you sort of spend on writing versus maybe engineering or producing or things for other people, or what's kind of a typical day like for you?
Well, if it does depend, obviously, because there's so many variables in this business.
If you're doing a record, you're doing a record.
Right.
So that's like kind of an all-encompassing thing. But like if you're not immersed in, say, an album project or something, it's like a massive X across the calendar for a month.
Like a TV schedule is going to be vastly different from, say, a record schedule.
All right, we'll talk about that a bit. What are you doing with the TV stuff these days?
Well, I'm doing one thing for a TV show that it's a new TV show that I think airs. I think it premieres in May.
Okay.
But I did literally like this past Monday and Tuesday. I mean, today's Sunday, right?
Oh yeah.
But I think last Monday and Tuesday, I worked 40 hours within 2 days, only separated by a 3-hour nap. So I did like 16 hours, took a 3-hour nap, and did 24 hours the following day.
And you're scoring TV.
I'm actually just mixing the score.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, my friend is scoring the music. He was the composer hired for this job. And he's like, hey, you want to mix this? I'm like, of course, it's great.
Sure.
And he's an amazing composer, too. So obviously I'd want to be involved. But
yeah.
Again, it's like you try to find things that will bring you some sort of monetary success, at least enough to save the day. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like get you from this gig to the next gig. So whatever happens in that interim, you're kind of like okay.
Right.
And so that's...
But that's like 40 hours in 2 days.
Yeah.
Is this, when we were talking to confirm this meet, you were waiting on the inputs from that. That's that gig.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, I guess I'm going to get it, and then I got to turn around.
Because the deadline's the deadline.
The deadline's the dead is the key word.
Yeah, because you're like one cog in the wheel, in the wheel, and like,
it's like something's got to be on a satellite by a certain time or whatever.
There's a chain of command, and I can't give it to these 8 people next in line until I get it from this person, and then there's like a round of notes, and then it goes back and forth, and it just keeps going around, and then eventually it gets done. But this was like the first episode, so everything was just very abstract.
Got it. So my question that I jumped off on, because I want to give context, to what you do, quote unquote. So what is something that you wish you were better at, or I could even rephrase it, like what's something that you're working on or that's got your curiosity to master, like a new skill or interest or things like that?
Yeah, I would have to give a little bit of a backstory as to how I arrived at this current project that I have.
Cool.
Just to frame it properly and give it a little context.
Please, yeah.
As I might have told you earlier, I discovered last year at 46 years old that I could sing.
Right. So what are you doing with that?
So this is coming from a guy that we now know had nothing but his sights set on being this guitar virtuoso guy that could dance and sing, or dance and play Frank Zappa songs.
Yeah, Shreddy Van Halen.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, and I never had any desire or needed to. Growing up in the 80s, being a guitar player was perfect. That was enough. You didn't need to
It was for me.
Yeah, you didn't need to be like the drummer and also a lead vocalist.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, just being a guitar player was enough.
You're not like Don Henley with the headset.
Right. So that was was everything.
Yeah, man.
So
stage left, buddy.
Yes.
A lot of kick and snare in the monitor and little vocal.
It was
and
enough.
A lot of me.
Yes. But so anyway, I'd been working on one record that I was very devoted to, like completely devoted to, for about a year and a half.
Okay.
That record got signed to a deal with Sony. Came out.
This is like an artist you were developing and stuff. Okay.
Yeah. And or rather, he was fully developed, but you were working
on the record.
Yeah. It was a long-term thing, and I was selling stocks to make, because I believed in the project so much. I was like buying gears. I was like, if we had this record, we had this amp, we could do it for this. It was this whole thing, and I was so completely
And a lot of times, to interject, so a lot of times the producer doesn't even have a big upfront fee. But you get a piece of it, right? So
no, at this time,
this
particular record, it started like this. Hey man, I want to make a record. I have all these new songs I've written.
Yeah.
And I want you to produce it with me. And I was like, fuck yes.
Sweet.
And I remember he sat there and he played me 2 songs and I was like, let's do this. I'm in.
All right.
100%. Let's do it.
Nice.
And that's all I did for a year and a half and did not get paid anything. And even when I recouped later, it was not even close to what I'd spent.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It wasn't even. Yeah, I mean, you know what budgets are now. You have to do again. You have to do.
Wow.
You have to do it for the right reasons that you love it.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's going to cost you way more than you'll ever recoup in your lifetime.
Right.
By today's standards.
Okay.
But again, it goes back to that idea of doing whatever you love all the time, as often as you possibly can, and do it for the joy of doing it.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. So you worked on that record for so long, year and a half.
Yeah. And then there was this long interim where there was a lot of record company buffoonery going on, and things going sideways, and this, all these different things.
Label's gonna label.
Label's gonna label. That is a very euphemistic way to put it, and I appreciate that.
Sure,
and I'm sure they will too.
Exactly.
We're not going to name names. But anyway, I had the most amazing time making that record.
Yeah.
The bottom completely fell out of it, but that's okay. Because again, every day I woke up, I was like, I get to go make this record with my best friend.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's kind of like my job criteria every day for about 16, 17 months was I get to go and play music and laugh my ass off with my friend every day.
Awesome.
And then I get to go home and then think about what I'm going to do for the next day.
Right.
And we just rinse and repeat.
Awesome.
So whether I made money on that or I lost money on that, it doesn't matter. Some days you're buying guitars and some days you're selling guitars, and that's this business. It is a journey, and you just got to love it because nothing is ever consistent.
Yeah.
There's you just got to go out and do it for the right reasons and go, I love doing this and that's why I do it. And it becomes more, it just becomes easier. Like once you recognize the obstacles and recognize the adversity with which you're going to be faced, you just roll with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's going to suck. Sometimes it's going to, you're going to be squatting in an abandoned studio down the hall from your other studio where you actually work. And I'm not saying whether that's a real thing or not that happened for 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's pretty specific. Pretty specific time period for it to be hypothetical, but I feel you. So you mentioned singing. I don't want to lose the plot on that. So what are you working on?
So after this whole thing with this record and this fallout and all this other stuff, it worked. Let me just digress and say it all worked out the way it was supposed to work out, and it was all fantastic, and it was a great record. Everything's cool. Nobody got hurt. Nobody died.
But there was that moment of looking in the abyss or something.
And you know what? The thing is like, you can judge how much a person cares about what they do by how they respond to its outcome, be it good or bad.
Absolutely.
And my devotion to it was such that when the bottom did fall out of it, for me, I was pretty much in bed for a year. Yeah. And I'm just going to be honest.
That had to kill you. I mean,
it was so devastating. It was almost like everything that you've done on your own accord for a year and a half ceases now. And thank you. And goodbye.
And how do you? This is the if I knew you better part of this. How do you pull yourself out of that?
Well, the thing about that is it's such a because again back to that avatar that you've created for yourself. You immediately go, I must suck. All this time I had the confidence to go in there and say, do this. I was the guy that was saying, because it was, it's
you're
part of the gig,
producing the record.
You're being a producer.
Yeah,
you're telling somebody how to do something that they do amazingly well.
Right. You're helping improve it. You're hearing it objectively, and
then you think, they put the kibosh on that, and you go, well, I must have sucked at doing that. However, you did get a record deal from that, and it did all work out. So I can't. But nonetheless, you start thinking darkness. You know what I mean? You think, I suck. I'm never going to work again.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to call me. This must be a blanket sort of a generalization.
Right.
And everything I do in life sucks. And then every day you wake up and you go, yep, nothing has changed. It's still the same thing. And then that person sends you roughs of the new material that you didn't have anything to do with. 'Cause it's almost like saying, here, I'm going to have sex with your wife, and here are the pictures to prove it.
And look how happy she is. You want her to
so
be happy. Look how happy she is. Oh,
it's
God.
that. So
I apologize it's a good metaphor, actually.
Why
apologize? Why not?
Husbands and wives everywhere, scorned or otherwise.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a reflective time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you eventually you come out of that darkness and you go, I really had so much fun making that record.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for this person. But there's so much that you have to restrict talking about because A, you're a professional, and B, you're a human being.
Yeah, I appreciate you're not naming the name when we kill the mic. I'm going to ask you if I think it's... But yeah, I appreciate that you have to be circumspect about this stuff.
Totally. And I also didn't want to... And because it was my best friend...
Yeah.
Who was I didn't want it to be... I didn't want to give him... I didn't want to spoil it for him.
Right. Because it worked out in a way, but not with you.
Yes.
In the sidecar.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, he got the record he wanted. We might have gotten him there together. Yeah. But, whatever. And I still got credit on the record, as one would, which I personally don't think I deserved in that way. I think... I think he did me a solid as a human being and as a friend in giving me the credit for doing it, but the resulting album wasn't of my particular involvement.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I had this, I sent you the prep questions of what have you been given credit for that you don't feel you fully earned. Mm-hmm. But do you think you earned it by, obviously your friend the artist felt that the time spent with you got him to that point. He couldn't have been there otherwise.
Right.
Do you
I think
own that now? Do you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. And everything's great now. And a lot of it
I get from you. And again, people audio only. I mean, I'm seeing your face, and yet, you couldn't be more genuine. And you're thoughtful when you're thoughtful. But I'm glad that it's come back full circle, obviously for you. But that's a tough.
And the record was released,
cycle.
And it does well, and it's out there doing things.
Great.
And so. I sound like Donald Trump. It's out there. It's doing things, and there are things. And,
I was hoping, and he found his way into the previous podcast.
I knew it was going to happen.
Moving on. It's okay.
So this record, it showed me how much I cared, and I think it also showed him, because if I had walked away, not being just completely leveled and devastated by how my services were no longer needed, he would have been like, God, you didn't give a shit, did you? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But because it just affected me so deeply, I didn't know it was going to affect me deeply until it did. And then I was like, oh, God, I guess I really did care.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for that, because it made me realize how much one can care about something other than themselves, and how much that whatever you define as your commitment and your devotion to, or whatever that object of devotion is, whether it's a spouse or whether it's a musical artistic project or otherwise, it doesn't matter. There's no distinction. There's no like, this is legitimate, like your devotion to your wife or husband is legitimate, but your devotion to your art or craft is a little lesser. You know what I mean?
Right.
No.
Right.
And that's why I personally, after having been married, I wouldn't want to subject anyone to that guy who's going to be absent all the time.
Right.
Because my mind was always on music from day one.
When did that end?
That ended officially in 2009, summer of 2009. I was younger, and I was so... There was never any trust issues of monogamy. There was none of that. It was otherwise a very cool relationship, and I think in some ways I was probably sabotaging it, but not realizing it at the time. Like I probably created some sort of resentment because I was compromising this artist to be this person with these. Now this whole life of domesticity and so forth.
Sure.
And that just really wasn't I don't think I was designed for that. And I think she probably understood and realized that, but we gave it a go. It didn't work. She realized it. She had the balls enough to go, you know what? I'm out of here. And I'm like, you know what? Otherwise, I would have just hung on and just carried it on and dragged her down. We were two ships passing in the night. She was a 9-to-5er. I was a 9-to-5er in the opposite direction. You know, I'm waking up at 9 to work all night. You know, it's just ridiculous. And I was never present. Again, back to being the ambitious guy with a person who has a very linear, structured sort of a life, professional life.
Right.
And it just... we became brother and sister, that whole thing, and then you know what I mean.
I do.
But anyway, back to the music and how that sort of record and the result of 2017 just kind of crushed me. I was just my soul was just crushed, and I know it sounds like it just reeks of pathos, but you know.
It's
it
your
is
story.
what it is.
So, is that when did you do that record at the studio that you shared with Brian, or was that?
No, it was another studio.
Oh, okay. Copy that.
And it was right after we did the Billy Ray Cyrus record, which was such an amazing
I remember
experience.
you posting about that. That looked like you guys were just having the best time.
That guy is my hero.
And he had like guest stars galore.
Oh my God!
Was that
have you
the
read
Joe
the
Perry
credits?
thing? Or
Joe Perry, Brian Adams, Miley was on the record.
Crazy.
Miley was on the record singing and playing the Tibetan bowls.
I got the record because of you, buddy.
Oh, thanks,
I got the record and enjoyed it, and I listened to it several times.
And you know what? That record,
that's, it's not necessarily my default genre or go-to, but I mean, it's a hell of a record.
It was such a great time, amazing time. And what I gleaned from Billy was he's still a brother now, you know what I mean? We still call and text and hang out, and whenever we see each other, it's all hugs and love. But he is such a genuine human being, such a sincere, earnest person that it really inspired me to want to be better as a human.
Okay.
Because every day we got to the studio, and mind you, I mean, he's Billy Ray Cyrus. He drove himself, and he was on time every time.
Yeah.
And he came in here every day, and he made you feel like you were the center of the universe. He made you feel important. He made you feel validated. He wanted to hear your story, and he didn't care about his whole thing.
He didn't need a mirror shown to how awesome he was. Yeah.
Because he was just this kid from Flatwoods, Kentucky.
Exactly.
That said,
he won the lottery multiple times, essentially.
Right. I mean, that old, what was the song?
Icky Breaky.
That was the result of a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like you
can't plan that sort of thing.
Right.
So, anyway, we did that record I'm talking about that was such an amazing experience that had a weird, sideways sort of a
not the Billy Ray Cyrus
for myself.
Record, a different record,
Yeah. But from that, what I started doing was I was writing all this new music for myself with no outlet, no direction, no place for it, no home for it. And then I started because a lot of times when I'm writing, I'm like singing a melody along with the guitar riff, whatever. And then what I discovered was I was just singing a little bit more, and then it was just happening as this natural sort of progression. And
it wasn't just like a melodic hum. You're actually
I was
coming
singing
up
words
with
and
actual words. Yeah.
Yeah.
For a guitar player, that's a big deal. That's a moment.
Right.
Like,
And
dear diary, today I sang words.
it was the weirdest thing. And again, I had no desire to be a singer, yet now I needed something to sing, so I was writing lyrics. Because in my world, producing records, I always felt that whoever was singing the song needed, if they were a writer, I mean, obviously if they weren't writing, it was a different scenario, but if
Sure.
they were a writer, they probably wanted to have a hand in what they were singing, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
there was
Even if they didn't originate the song, they should put their take on it.
Yeah. Because
earn that co-write, pop stars. Don't
Right.
just take it.
Yeah,
Earn it.
exactly.
Earn that co-write.
So in that regard, I felt that when I was writing in that capacity, that my role was a little bit more like just writing the music, leaving
Right.
the lyrics and melody to the top line, the singer, which is what I normally did. So now here I find myself, I'm like, well, if I'm going to be singing, I got to have lyrics, and because I have such crazy standards for myself, I got to write great songs. So, the next thing I know, I'm writing lyrics, and I'm writing full songs, and I'm singing songs, just thinking I'm going to just demo these songs for whatever reason.
But you're a professional engineer and producer, so you can do a master sounding demo.
Yeah, right. So,
And then it sounds pretty good. Well, let's make it sound better.
yeah.
Is that how you fall down the rabbit hole to your artist project?
Yeah, but because I understand what it looks like behind the curtain.
Yeah.
I know I'm not this guy that's going to do these sort of I'm not going to cobble together a performance. I got to go sing the fucking song. I'm not going
Right.
to sit there and like go, it's like dogs barking and children dying. It's going to be the sound of a person who can legitimately
Right.
sing.
You know how to do it.
And then sometimes you got to fix things here and there, but that's just normal with even the
Exactly.
best singers. But I found myself doing that more and more. And then I was sending a friend of mine songs to just reference. And she said after about 4 or 5 of these songs, she's like, oh my God, what do you do? Where's this all coming from? I'm like, I don't know. I just started writing all this stuff as a result of this fallout from this record. 2017 was like this black cloud, And in 2018, I've discovered I could sing, and now I'm writing all these songs, and da-da-da-da. And I'm singing them, I'm recording them, and they're pretty good-ish. And so she says to me, she's like, well, of course you could sing. You could always sing. Because she and I had worked together on other songs, and she goes, I always thought you could sing. I'm like, why am I the last to know this? But because there was this like, until you say I can play the guitar or I can sing, you don't really feel confident enough to say you could do it. So you kind of like in terms of singing, I would open my mouth, sing a note, and if it sounded like shit, I'd just clam up and not continue.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I'll leave that to the singers. You know what I mean?
Right, I do.
Because I'm a guitar player.
I used to open my mouth a little for backup and bands here and there, and then occasionally, depending on the song, it was all right. But there were times I'd hear myself, and I just drop out during the song.
Right.
I wouldn't even.
Yeah.
I'm like, nah, I think we don't need to hear me.
Right.
My vocal stylings to this. I'll concentrate on hitting the pedals at the right time.
It's so much easier too, and nobody can really see your feet behind monitors, so you're good to go.
Right, exactly.
So, something happened, and between her saying that, and I did another record where I got where a friend of mine sent me a text, and he said, "Man, I'm going through the background." Let me back up. That same person who instilled this confidence in me to sing and said, hey, of course you can sing. I'm like, really? I didn't know that. So a few months prior to that, I'd sing some background vocals for one of her songs that she released. And her dad was producing the record. And I sent these background vocals. He didn't, and I think about a week had passed because we're just, everybody has lives and has things to do. He texted me just out of the blue. He goes, man, I just went through these vocals you sent me, and they're fucking fantastic, man. And I'm like, really? Awesome. So between that and her validation, I'm like, maybe I could do the singing thing. So then I'm just starting, 2017's black spot in my life didn't even exist, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm just like writing songs, sending them. She's like, 2 months later, she texts me and she's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this project where it's like a musical. It's like this 70s glam sort of thing. Would you want to do that with me and we sing together? And I'm like, wait, I just started singing. You're validating me as a singer. And now you want me to be in a project with you where I'm one of those singers, a singer. Fuck yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So then I just took the ball and ran with it. In between June of last year, June of 2018, and November of that same year, we wrote and fully produced 12 songs, enough for an entire album, everything, within like a 5-month period, a whole record. Yeah. So we have a record in the can for this particular purpose, which we're way ahead. It's got like an accompanying, visual.
Is there still a book to write for this, for like to be a musical and stuff?
I mean, yeah.
So you have the musical backbone of a musical theater.
Well, we have several episodes written for this, or chapters, or
So whatever form it takes, whether it's like
way ahead.
Is it possibly a TV thing or
initially
TV?
It was going to be a web series kind of thing. And then we kind of just saw the potential in it, and it just grew into this larger picture where it was like a musical, you know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Well, let me ask you this as we sort of head toward the wrapping it up.
Yeah.
I guess it's funny. I think you said, how are we going to fill an hour? Well, it's almost an hour and a half. And
wow.
Yeah, man. Who or what do you most credit for your success?
Man, I wish I could give credit to a human being, but I've always been on my own. And I'm not giving credit to myself.
Well,
I mean, it's just blind tenacity, really.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, talk about that. I want like actionable takeaways or understandable, even if it's not somebody's particular need,
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed to be that regardless of the adversity, I still continued to be excited about doing it, and excited about the possibilities, and excited about creating and manifesting a vision, and just having a great time doing it. So whether I was homeless or I hadn't eaten for, November 4th, 1992, I drove myself to the ER because I was having heart palpitations. That was 1992. I just turned 21.
Okay.
And I basically had OD'd on caffeine because all I had eaten or consumed for a week was coffee.
Oh my gosh.
And the reason being, not the reason being, but what I was doing the entire time, I was starving, was I was writing music all night. I was just writing, literally scoring music.
Yeah.
And I was finding so much joy. And
like you forgot to eat, like you could have bought a hamburger,
but probably couldn't really afford. But that was back when I smoked cigarettes too. And then
between the nicotine and the caffeine, you could convince yourself that you're alert.
And you could be like, if I have to choose one or the other, if I choose nicotine, it'll suppress my appetite and I'll be okay.
Sure.
And
get more mileage out of the pack of smokes than the one hamburger was the thought.
So genius.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some of our best decisions are made when we're idiots.
Exactly. But it landed me kind of in the hospital.
Yep.
Yeah, they put me on the cardiometer and the whole thing. And the doctor just looked at me and said, "You literally OD'd on caffeine."
Wow.
And I'm like, God, I am such a dork. I can't even OD on something cool-ish. Yeah, nobody has ever caffeine chic.
Yeah, VH1's not going to do a behind the music. Yeah, OD'd on caffeine.
So, that. But, it's that's literally and metaphorically an example of why I do it and why I still do it. I don't know. It's just I find joy in I found my bliss a long time ago, and despite whatever I ended up in Florida from Monroe, Louisiana, because I was in the mall in Louisiana. And I had long hair at the time. It was 1992. And someone said, or rather, I was in the mall looking for a job, like any random job at some whatever.
Some retail store.
Yeah. couldn't get hired in Monroe, Louisiana with long hair, so they told me to basically go away. And while I'm in the mall, there was a local DJ who happened to be in the mall, and she comes up to me, "Hey, Stuart, how you doing? Hey, I just want to let you know I'm moving to Florida in a couple of weeks. Hey, you want to move to Florida?" My response was, "Yes."
Sweet.
I had no pot to piss in. I didn't have any. I didn't even think I had gas money to drive my Nissan Sentra from Monroe to Florida.
Yeah.
But I just said yes. So a lot of times just saying yes was enough to get me the hell out of there and on to the next. Well, let's figure it out. So that was always my MO is I'll figure it out.
Exactly. I relate to that a lot. I think people will enjoy hearing that. What's next for you think?
More music, hopefully, seeing some of these projects through to the end, and hopefully they just, I don't know. Every day I wake up and I have the desire to make a song, and then we find a home for it. You know what I mean? You just do your best and run it up the flagpole and see who salutes, as Lemmy once said.
Awesome. Well, when I come back through LA, when you have to sit down, and I'll work the rust out of my fingers, see if I got any songs.
Yeah, man.
Just to bounce around. And Mike, Stuart, thanks, man.
Absolutely.
Awesome to have you. Awesome to be had here in your studio.
It's an absolute pleasure to be seen and be heard and hang out with you. And
Thank
finally,
you,
after all this time.
I know, and I'll put this in the show notes, but if you want to say where people can find you on the interwebs and such, or do you have a website you point people to, or are you a man of mystery?
Yeah, well, we have the studio website with there's a little info on there. It's called centralcommand.com. There's my IMDb page, probably all music, Discogs.
Right.
What else?
Okay. All right.
Stuart CARARAS Instagram.
We'll gather up the links.
Yeah.
Put them in the place for the people.
It's just more live
to find the things.
Yeah.
As it all is.
Exactly.
All right. Good to talk to you, man.
Thanks so much, man.
All right, that's the show this week. Don't forget to find out more. You can visit the crazyinagoodway.com website. Again, our theme music has been created by the wonderful Carl King, and our show logo is by my esteemed friend Ronald Paredes. Don't forget to say hi to Stuart CARARAS on Instagram. Check out some of his music if you are so inclined. Thank you again, and I will see you next week.